right, everybody, get ready. Because today we're going deep on something, well, let's just say it's a real piece of Americana.
Hmm. Okay, I like that.
Yeah. You know, people are always saying, don't trust anyone smarter than you. Tackling that, but like way deeper.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
It's not just like some folks disliking the brainy types. This is about being skeptical of knowledge itself. Anti-intellectualism in America, folks, and it's juicy.
You got that right. It's everywhere when you start to see it.
And we've got a source that lays it out, no punches pulled. It straight up defines this whole thing as, get this, the systematic denigration of science-based facts and the pursuit of theory and knowledge. Heavy stuff, right?
Wow, yeah. Systematic denigration. That's putting it mildly.
Right. And it gets you thinking, how did this become like the American way? This YouTube essay, just called American Anti-Intellectualism, really kicked off this deep dive for me.
It's wild when you start tracing it back. Like, we put guys like Ben Franklin, George Washington on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Self-made, practical, all that.
Right, the American dream, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
But here's the thing. That love for the self-made man, it kind of backfired. Formal education, book smarts, suddenly sus.
No kidding. Tell me about it. It's like somewhere we decided book smarts meant you were out of touch.
Exactly. And the essay even called out Thomas Jefferson getting mocked for being, well, Thomas freaking Jefferson.
If he's not safe, who is? That just shows how deep this thing goes.
Deep and old, my friend. We're talking shaping the country from the very beginning. Then we hit the 1800s and things get even more interesting.
Oh yeah, here comes the religious angle. Buckle up, everybody.
It's not just religion, it's this wave of anti-rationalism, like faith-trumping facts, literally.
This is where we see seemingly unrelated stuff start to connect. And it gets kind of wild.
Totally. And one guy really embodies this shift, Dwight Moody, big-time evangelist back then. Get a load of this quote. "I don't read any book unless it will help me to understand the Bible."
Whoa. Talk about picking a side.
Right. And it's not just him. This was hugely influential. Suddenly, a specific view, a specific interpretation, that's all that mattered. Reason, logic, out the window.
So you've got distrust of smarty pants, love for the self-made guy, and now this intense religious anti-rationalism. America's got the perfect breeding ground for, well, you know.
Oh, it gets worse. Fast forward to the 1900s.
Don't tell me it gets worse. How can it get worse?
Hold on. Because now we've got the efficiency movement throwing its hat in the ring. And at first glance, you're like, okay, efficiency sounds good, right? But it kind of backfired big time.
Okay, yeah, you got to explain that one.
Okay.
How does wanting things to be efficient create more anti-intellectualism?
Picture this. Everyone's obsessed with the best way to do everything, right? So suddenly you've got experts everywhere, and while that's supposed to help, it actually makes that divide even worse. Regular folks, they're looking at these experts, these intellectuals, and thinking, they're so out of touch. It played right into those existing anxiety.
And that underlying tension, right? It's like it just keeps building and building until, bam, the 1960s happen.
Oh yeah, the 60s. Talk about a turning point. Everything's being challenged. Civil rights, Vietnam War, women's rights, the old ways, the intellectual establishment. It's all on the chopping block.
And who's leading the charge against all this change?
Exactly. It's often the people who feel the most threatened by these new ideas, this new world. And that, my friend, is where anti-intellectualism comes roaring back. It's this knee-jerk reaction against anything that rocks the boat, anything that challenges the way they see the world.
It's like this endless cycle, new ideas versus old ways. But it's got to be more than just history, right? I mean, the essay goes deep on the psychology of all this, and man, that's where it got really interesting for me.
Oh, absolutely. To really get this, we got to get inside our heads, look at how our brains are wired. Because it's not just about society. It's about those mental shortcuts we all take, those cognitive biases.
So we're like programmed for this. Our brains are wired for anti-intellectualism. Come on, that's a little intense, don't you think?
I wouldn't say hardwired, but think of it like this. Our brains get hit with so much information constantly, right?
Oh, tell me about it.
So to deal with it, they develop these shortcuts, these rules of thumb.
Our brains are like, too much info, gotta cheat.
Exactly. We call them cognitive biases, and sometimes, well, they lead us down the wrong path.
Okay, I'm following so far. But how does this turn into full-blown anti-intellectualism?
One word: confirmation bias. We're drawn to things that confirm what we already believe, even if, what we believe is totally off.
Oh man, this one, I know. I've got this friend, right? Loves a good conspiracy theory, alternative facts, the whole 9 yards. I could show them all the evidence in the world, and they'd find a way to make it fit their view.
There you go. A textbook example.
It's exhausting, honestly.
And it's not even always conscious, right? It's not just seeking stuff out. It's that automatic nope when something contradicts what we think, especially if it's tied up with our identity, who we hang out with.
Right, like admitting you're wrong means leaving your group, even if that group believes some crazy stuff.
Bingo. So now add in social pressure, maybe even a little fear, and it's way easier to just go along with the crowd, even if deep down.
You know something's off. It's like easier to be wrong together than risk being the odd one out.
And that's how those simplified, often wrong explanations take hold. We're social creatures, after all.
All right, so we're kind of doomed then. We've got history working against us, our own brains tricking us. It's a lot.
I wouldn't say doomed, just knowing about these biases, being able to spot them, that's a huge step.
Okay, so we're aware. Now what?
Now we got to talk power, because this isn't just happening in a vacuum, right? The essay gets into how politicians, corporations, they use this stuff to their advantage.
Okay, yeah, let's get into it. Because the examples in there are pretty wild.
Oh, yeah, and it goes way back. They brought up Dwight Eisenhower, you believe that?
Eisenhower. Mr. Military-Industrial Complex himself?
Didn't seem like the anti-intellectual type.
That's what made it so effective. He played the man of the people card. No need for fancy talk, just common sense.
Like, I'm just a regular guy, trust me.
Exactly. The essay even quoted him saying, intellectuals are men who use more words than necessary to tell more than they know.
And this is the guy who's president of Columbia University, the irony.
Total pro. And unfortunately, he paved the way for, well, a lot of what we see today, especially on the right. Oh, totally. Got to be the outside of the regular guy, even if you're anything but.
George W. Bush and that whole cowboy persona, remember?
Oh, yeah. Textbook.
Oh, yeah.
Despite, being from a pretty privileged background.
And then you've got the Trump administration and COVID. Talk about a masterclass in using anti-intellectualism.
Oh, yeah. That was rough. Downplaying science, pushing conspiracy theories, attacking anyone who disagreed.
All calculated to appeal to that distrust of authority, of experts.
Yeah.
And scarily effective.
It's scary how easily people buy into it.
But to be fair, this isn't a one-sided thing, right?
Yep.
The essay pointed out that both sides use this playbook.
Yeah, like Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat. He did the whole working class hero thing, too.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that existing current, regardless of your political stance.
So no matter who's in charge, we're kind of stuck with this underlying anti-intellectualism. Depressing, but true, I guess.
Unfortunately, yes. But politicians, they're not the only ones. Corporations are arguably even better at this, with way bigger consequences.
Okay, spill the tea. Which example really got to you?
Oh, it's got to be the fossil fuel industry and climate change, the way they've deliberately misled the public. For decades, it's infuriating.
Classic case of profits over, well, the planet.
They've literally used the same tactics as big tobacco. Funding biased research, promoting fringe scientists, just creating confusion.
All to keep the money flowing, even if it means, destroying the environment in the process.
And here's the kicker. They exploit those same cognitive biases we talked about. Confirmation bias. Check. Fear. Check. They present themselves as the voice of reason, fighting against the elites, even when what they're saying is verifiably false.
This has been eye-opening, but man, it's a lot. If it's this ingrained, can we even fight back? I mean, what can we actually do as individuals? So it's not hopeless. There's got to be something we can do.
Oh, totally. It starts with us, right? Being aware of our own biases, those shortcuts our brains are taking. The essay really stressed knowing about logical fallacies, those tricks people use in arguments.
Okay, so what should I be listening for in everyday life? Give me an example.
What about ism? It's everywhere. Someone criticizes something and bam, they bring up something totally unrelated.
Oh, right. It's like, what about this other bad thing? Instead of dealing with the first thing.
Exactly. It's a distraction tactic. And it works because it gets you off track.
So annoying. How do you even respond to that? It feels like a dead end.
You got to acknowledge the other point, right? Like, yeah, that's a problem too, but then bring it right back to the original issue. Don't get sidetracked.
Stay focused. I like it. The essay also talked about willful ignorance, which honestly sounds kind of scary.
Yeah, that one's tough. It's like someone's actively avoiding information, They've made up their mind, and that's it.
Facts don't matter. It's like they're purposely keeping their eyes shut.
And it's often driven by emotions, personal values, all that. Logic kind of goes out the window.
So what do you even do? How do you have a conversation with someone like that?
The essay suggested empathy. Instead of going in guns blazing, try to understand why they're so resistant. What are they afraid of?
It's like finding that common ground, that human connection.
Exactly. You're not going to change their whole worldview overnight, right? It's about making those conversations, even the hard ones, more productive.
This has been amazing, but I got to be honest, I'm still a little, I don't know, worried. If this anti-intellectualism is so, like, embedded in America, can we really overcome it?
It's the million-dollar question, right? And honestly, I don't have a simple answer, but what we've learned today, that's huge. Being aware of our biases, being willing to listen, question our own beliefs, that's how we chip away at it.
It's like that Carl Sagan quote, right? It's far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, even if it's comfy.
Perfectly said. Embracing critical thinking, staying curious, that's what moves us forward towards a more informed, more just, hopefully a brighter future.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, a huge thank you to all of you for joining us on this deep dive into, well, the deep end of American thought. It's been real, folks. Keep those minds open, and we'll catch you next time.